is there one food that's slowing us down as endurance athletes?
As endurance athletes, I would say I get a lot of people that come to me and they think that they need to be focusing on protein, protein, protein. And I think that comes from kind of the bodybuilding world did a really good job of just kind of turning protein into this star macronutrient, right? And everyone was focused on protein, but they didn't recognize that is very different for strength focused athletes, the gym people, versus endurance athletes. So I get people that I talk to that are even like, oh man, I should be eating protein on my rides, right? Or I should be focusing on protein for recovery. Protein for recovery is typically what people think of, right? Recovery equals protein. But for endurance athletes, if you are eating mostly protein after your efforts, especially, that's the food that's slowing you down. Because when you look at it, actually what you need to be focused on is mostly carbohydrate and a little bit of protein. The ratio is 4 parts carbohydrate and 1 part protein. So perfect example is like the Scratch Labs recovery mix. You've had Alan on the podcast, right?
That's correctly.
Yeah. Their recovery mix is 40 grams of carbohydrate, 10 grams of protein. That's exactly what you're looking for after endurance exercise. If you're focusing on protein, you're not giving your body the carbohydrate that it needs to rebuild those glycogen stores and to adapt from the workout that you just did as an endurance athlete.
So is protein slowing us down because it's displacing carbohydrates? So we're coming in from a ride and we're just having protein instead of carbohydrates? Or is there something actually like in the protein that's inhibiting the absorption of carbohydrates?
It's slowing you down because it could be displacing the carbohydrates, right? If you're focusing too much on protein and you're not getting enough carbohydrate, then you're missing the carbohydrate that you need to recover. But also what I'll say is it literally does slow down how your body digests carbohydrate. So it's a really nice thing to use if, say, you're just hanging out throughout the day and you're eating a lunch or a snack or something like that. And instead of eating only carbohydrates and having a blood sugar spike and then a blood sugar crash, if you combine the carbohydrate with protein, it'll actually make it go like this more steadily. So it can make carbohydrates burn more slowly. So this is what we get into when we're talking with like people that are bike packing or during ultra events, because they're actually skipping multiple meals and they do need to be consuming small amounts of protein when they're on the bike to make those carbohydrates last longer and also to provide hunger prevention, which is what protein does. So it kind of depends on the context, but yeah, it can slow things down in multiple ways.
Interesting. So if that's the wrong way to do it, you mentioned the formula for Scratch Labs is 4-1, so 40 grams of carbohydrates for 10 grams. But surely that's not like a fixed amount I should be taking. Like if this evening I'm a little bit time crunched, I'm only going to get maybe 60 minutes on the indoor bike this evening versus tomorrow morning, I'm going to get a 5-hour endurance ride. I don't want to be having the same recovery drink coming in from both of those, assumingly.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's just one pure example, right? Like typically what you're looking for is any effort that's like 1 to 2 hours, 3 hours long, you're looking at about 2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. When you get up into the 4+ hour efforts, you're looking at double that, 4 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram body weight. And for a lot of people, that sounds like a lot. And what I say with that is it doesn't have to be what you eat for the first opportunity right after you finish that effort. It can be, okay, I'm going to have this with my recovery shake, whether it's, the Scratch recovery, whether it's some sort of chocolate milk, whether it's a smoothie with a banana and some other kind of, milk or almond milk or oat milk in it and whatever else you want in there. And then, okay, for your next few eating opportunities, you're also focusing on those carbohydrates along with other components of a balanced meal, like some protein, some fats, some plants, and that kind of thing. So don't think that you need to be sitting there getting all of this carbohydrate in one sitting.
Does this glycogen reuptake window, has that been debunked or is that still? I remember when I was starting cycling, it was almost like coaches would tell you to stopwatch as soon as you get off the bike. You need to be taking your recovery drink within 15 minutes because we're most sensitive to reabsorbing carbohydrates during that period. Does it matter when we take the carbohydrates? Can I, come home, upload my ride to Strava, get a shower, clean my bike, and then prepare myself, a linguine that takes 35, 40 minutes to prepare? Am I damaging my recovery by doing that?
Yeah, so there is this thing called exercise-induced glucose uptake, which means that when you exercise, your sensitivity to insulin, for insulin to act on your muscles and kind of ignore your fat cells, that is increased, right? So insulin will act on your muscle cells more specifically. And as you get away from your exercise, you finish that workout, and then time goes on, that sensitivity decreases. So there definitely is an opportunity there to utilize that sensitivity and get in some source of carbohydrates. Like the recovery shake, what I typically recommend is finish your effort, have something that's high in carbohydrate, whatever is available, whatever sounds good to you. Have the shake, have something, whatever, like any kind of high carbohydrate food that's available to you in your kitchen. And then go and do the shower, change, that kind of thing. And then go on to your next meal within an hour or two after that also contains, the ingredient, the carbohydrate, that kind of thing.
Does the division matter? So say if I work out the maths on this, I do a long ride, a 5-hour ride tomorrow. So I'm in that 4 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So say the maths, I'm so bad at maths, but say it works out as I need to take in 140 grams of carbohydrates tomorrow. Does the post-ride, does the division matter if I take 70 grams from my recovery drink and 70 grams from my solid meal versus 40 grams from my recovery drink? Or what's the optimum breakdown of instant carbs to slightly delayed carbs, we'll call them?
Yeah, it's really kind of just like what's realistic for you, honestly. This is the kind of stuff where people can get so caught up in, like what's the optimal, like 0.1% thing that I can do that's going to be a little bit different. But what I say is like, do what's realistic for you to fit it into your day and make it so that you're not driving yourself crazy trying to do all these calculations. And I have to get in, 60% now and 40% later. Do what's easy. Do what you're going to be able to do consistently.
I think that's a great point, because I hear you on the Scratch Labs. I've never tasted their recovery drink, but I use some of their on-bike products, and no brand affiliation. I use Morton and a bunch of other ones.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're out for a 4 or 5 hour ride, you come home, you've been taking all this like it's not food, it's stuff they send with, Elon sending with the astronauts up to space. Like this, it's a food substitute. And when you come home, almost like the last thing you want is another commercial recovery drink. It's like you want something that feels a bit more nourishing. And for me, chocolate milk kind of feels like a halfway house between a commercial recovery drink and a solid food. And I kind of default to that a lot of the time. And like you said, it's because it's something I can repeatedly do because I live very close to the store that sells chocolate milk.
Yeah, that's
Am
fair.
I leaving gains on the table by that, or you think that's stick with the chocolate milk?
That's great. If it's easy for you to get, if you get it in, if you enjoy it, then you can move on to the next thing. But that's pretty much mostly carbohydrate, a little bit of protein. If you want to take it to the next level and make something, I make a smoothie. It's just a really easy recovery smoothie. It's 1 banana, 2 tablespoons of any kind of nut butter. That's going to give you your protein. And then any type of milk. It can be a dairy milk. It can be an unsweetened almond milk or something like that. And then if you like chocolate, you can add a tablespoon or so of cocoa powder. That, I've done the calculations for that. That is about that 40 grams of carbohydrate and 10 grams of protein. So it's that 4-to-1 ratio. Like you said, right? If it's going to be a 4-hour effort, you might be doing double that. If it's a 2-hour effort, you might be doing that regular recipe.
So I want to, and this might seem like a little bit of a jump for anyone just tuning into this, the first podcast was kind of building on a theme we talked about in the last podcast, where we kind of talked about the evolution of carbohydrates during exercise, where when I was starting out it was maybe 20 to 30 grams, and now athletes are pushing the upper limits of 120 to 140. So building on that, like as someone who's been back training for about 4 weeks now, and it's the first time that I've consistently tried to take in this many carbs per hour, I feel better off the bike. I feel better on the bike. But my concern is, like, what's this doing to my stomach? Like, where's the line between performance and longevity? Is there a trade-off here where I'm going a little bit better on the bike, but what am I doing to my gut microbiome? Like, there was an old wives' tale here: if you swam in the sea and the sea was water or dirty water, to like have a can of Coke after it. The can of Coke would kill the good and bad bacteria in your stomach. like I'm almost having a can of Coke every session now, and I'm having like a bag of Haribo every session. That's like, I'm going to lose my teeth, but I'm worried like what's going on internally, and where's that trade-off between performance and longevity?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say with that, I think there's a big difference between giving your body what it needs when it needs it and when it's going to utilize it and burn it, as opposed to giving your body that when you're sitting on the couch all day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, yeah, I do believe that quality matters, right? I believe that, like sometimes the Coke or the candy with the artificial colors and that kind of stuff in it, like sometimes that's what you can get because you're running into a convenience store and you're grabbing that. But also there's a very big difference between, for example, like a cookie that you make at home with ingredients that that your grandmother could have had in her kitchen, as opposed to a cookie that's been sitting on the shelf at the convenience store and could sit there for another 6 months because it's full of preservatives and a bunch of artificial flavors and things like that in it. So
yeah, bacteria won't eat these cookies.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So we can be picky about that kind of stuff when we have the capacity to be picky. I think there's a balance to be found there, right? You don't want to drive yourself crazy and say, oh, I'm never going to eat any of those foods that have this ingredient, the artificial colors, the artificial flavors, the preservatives, that kind of thing, because sometimes that can be it's better than nothing, especially as an athlete. You don't want to be underfueled. You don't want to be in a massive calorie deficit and having the negative stress of that when you are riding at the intensity and the volume that you're riding at, right? But when you can be picky about it and pick the foods that are.
The challenge is with it, Uri. Like if you look at the back of some of these wrappers, like not picking on just Morton, but you look at the back of the wrapper. Like I don't know what them ingredients are. Like the words have 48 letters in them, and it's like and then the gel comes out and it looks something closer to something I put inside my tire for tubular sealant than it looks something that will go on my dinner plate. And it's like, I get that it's good for performance because I can feel that. But how do I judge the percentage of these that should be making up part of my training ride? Because at the moment I'm having virtually no homemade stuff. Should I be shifting to at least 50% homemade stuff, or only defaulting to the sport specific stuff on race day or key sessions? Or do you have a rule of thumb to kind of navigate that?
I don't necessarily have a rule of thumb because it really depends on what works for each person. Like the ability to consume the more real food options becomes a skill and something that needs to be practiced. I wouldn't say that you should only use, like the sports nutrition products when you're racing and the other stuff when you're not racing, because then you could run into some issues when suddenly you're racing and you haven't been using that during training. But there's no ratio, right? Because it depends on so many scenarios. It depends on what's available to you. It depends on what your body tolerates, what your gut tolerates, what you're able to eat. Again, it goes back to, all right, what can I actually get in that's going to be enough calories, enough grams of carbohydrate throughout every single hour? And typically for the people that we work with, the one thing that we want to get away from is saying, oh, I only need to rely on these prepackaged sports nutrition products that are marketed to the masses, where you could go into the grocery store and you could buy some gummies from the bulk section that might be the exact same thing that's in that packet of sports nutrition product. It's going to have the same amount of carbohydrates. It's going to have the same amount of everything else in it, but it might have a more simple ingredient list. Because, for here in the States, we can go into Whole Foods or we can go into a more natural grocery store and we can find the natural sweetened, or not necessarily natural sweetened, but like the cane sugar versus the high fructose corn syrup gummies, right? And they don't have artificial colors in them. They have color from beet and turmeric and that kind of thing. Those are going to give you the same amount of energy, but they're not going to have a bunch of extra stuff in them, which is a nice option to have.
Because if it comes out at the moment that Haribo is carcinogenic, I'm in a pretty bad spot.
A lot of people are.
Those fried eggs. You're telling me they're not fried eggs. They're not like dehydrated fried eggs is what you're telling me. So any recipes you're using that I could bearing in mind time crunch, balancing a million priorities, very poor culinary skills, any nice homemade recipes that I could start bringing out on the bike to supplement or replace some of those gels?
Yeah. I love a good banana bread. A loaf of banana bread, especially because you can batch cook it and then you can freeze it individually and put it in your freezer and then pull it out, kind of like the same as a bar. I love it because it's a great, easy source of carbohydrate and the moisture content is super high. The moisture content being high and this kind of stuff makes it really easy to eat, right? Like you can bite a couple bites of banana bread and it goes down pretty easily. You don't need to swig a whole half a water bottle to get it down because it's a dry, prepackaged bar. So banana bread is a staple. Making like Blondie cookie bars is another staple, or just going to my local bakery and seeing what I can grab. But typically those sweet breads are pretty awesome options.
And where do you get your ChatGPT in these recipes? YouTube, or have you got favorite cookbooks?
I would just, let's see. We can add one to the show notes. I'll find you one that I like. It's Half Baked Harvest. She's a gal that's based here in Colorado, and she has a super simple banana bread recipe. But typically, when you're looking at a recipe like that, just find one that's just simple ingredients, right? Like a banana bread is going to be the mashed bananas, the flour, the sugar, real sugar, eggs, and some sort of leavening agents, and that's pretty much it. The Scratch Labs.
Alan Murchison's cookbook. Have you seen that one?
Yes. Yeah,
there's some good stuff in there. The pancakes are sweet.
Pancakes are great ride fuel. Bring some pancakes.
Kind of come apart in your pocket though, like, and they're stuck in the headphone jack in your phone and stuff, and it just causes a lot of problems.
Yeah. So that's the stuff to practice, right? Like, there's the convenience of these packaged sports nutrition foods that have been made easy to consume. They've got all the right wrappers, the right containers, and all that kind of stuff. So ultimately, when you're consuming more of these real food options, you're probably going to have a learning curve. It's going to probably be a little bit more messy than usual. But then my question becomes, like, if you're going to eat that more frequently than you're going to eat yet another gel or yet another sports nutrition product because you can't even stomach it, then it's probably going to be worth a little bit extra effort or a little bit extra mess to get in the calories that you need with something that you're actually excited about eating and that you can feel good about eating.
Roadman, let me tell you about a drink I'm obsessed with at the moment, Elements. I've spoken to so many of the top coaches and nutritionists, and they all agree that getting the right balance of electrolytes is key. Hydration isn't just about water, it's about maintaining the right balance of electrolytes, and that's where Element comes in. It's packed with essential electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Element helps you sustain steady energy levels, sharpen your cognitive focus, and keep your muscles cramp-free during tough workouts. Here's a special offer just for our listeners. Get a free Element sample pack with any purchase by visiting drinklmnt.com/roadmancycling. So head on over to drinklmnt.com/roadmancycling to claim your free sample pack today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. Click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.